با سلام. پیام نرگس محمدی که به وسیله من تقی رحمانی برای دریافت جایزه آزادی بیان یونسکو خوانده می شود.
I would like to express my gratitude to the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, its Honorable Director General, and the esteemed jury for bestowing me with the great honor of the Guillermo Cano Prize for Freedom of Expression this year. I first heard that I would be receiving the UNESCO Freedom of Expression Award while in prison, just as I was being summoned on new charges to the Evin prosecutor's office. Of course, as I had done in my last 3 trials, I announced that I would not, under any circumstances, participate in any court proceedings because I refused to recognize the legitimacy of the Islamic regime. The Islamic regime is an authoritarian, religious, and misogynistic government, and I have and will continue to fight and struggle against it. For a proper understanding of the right of freedom of speech, we must first pay attention to the development of the concept of rights. The fact that today we believe in having rights and not simply to be right has not been won easily. It has taken centuries and the sacrifice of countless lives, those who were sentenced to death merely for speaking that which was not accepted to be true at the time, for us to freely be able to speak of the right to be wrong and the preservation of human dignity that comes with it. But still, in countries like Iran, we witness autocratic rulers with self-serving ideologies and profit-seeking motives destroying the lives of millions of people by using the rhetoric of the right to national sovereignty and the right to self-determination to control the people within their borders and spread their influence to other parts of the world. Allow me to also point out that while the UNESCO 2030 Agenda is one of the most progressive and positive documents to date, aiming to achieve sustainable development, peace, and human rights, the supreme leader of the Islamic Republic has been personally preventing Iran from joining such a global effort. While the 2030 Agenda emphasizes the empowerment of all girls and women in an effort to achieve gender equality, in Iran, for months now, female students have been being poisoned with chemical gases. The government has been propagating a policy that uses intimidation and scare tactics to prevent young women and girls from going to school. Like the Taliban in Afghanistan, the government of the Islamic Republic is seeking to deprive girls of the right to education. The main difference between the two being that the Taliban announces through the loudspeakers of its ministerial buildings that it is doing so, while the Islamic regime pursues this goal through deceptive policymaking. The 2030 Agenda emphasizes public access to university education. However, under the Islamic regime, Baha'i youth in Iran are faced with violence and security forces when seeking a university education, and other youth and children face such high rates of poverty, high costs of living and education, lack of employment, and such a state of despair that they are discouraged from pursuing higher education altogether. We must remember that awareness and freedom of speech are in a two-way, mutual, and dynamic relationship, whereby each provides a platform for the other, while also being the result and consequence of it. Education and learning in schools and universities is one of the most important ways to grow awareness in society. Thus, deprivation of education means lowering the level of awareness, which means, by extension, limiting the freedom of expression. Ladies and gentlemen, freedom of speech in Iran has been threatened in many ways, but most notably, 1. Through the violent suppression of journalists, the press, human rights defenders, and universities. And 2. Through the suppression of civil society and its institutions as the platform builders and agents of dialogue for the exchange of opinions, collaboration, and mutual understanding. The freedom of speech, in its truest form, needs a platform and suitable opportunity to be effectively exercised. by depriving the society of independent civil society institutions. The government of Iran's policies have created and intensified ethnic, religious, and tribal differences and conflict, as well as gender discrimination and inequality, while exacerbating further economic and social gaps to ultimately eliminate and distract from the possibility of dialogue and the freedom to express thoughts and ideas. Distinguished guests, please remember that for months now, Iranians have gathered together and stood against one of the most anti-humanitarian and anti-life governments in the modern era, with the Women, Life, Freedom, Zan Zendegi Azadi movement, seeking freedom, equality, and democracy for their country. I ask you not to leave us alone in this fight. In adopting your own policies, consider supporting our civil society and keeping in mind the people in the streets, the political and ideological prisoners, the prisoners facing execution and the death penalty, those protesting, as well as the civil and political advocates. Help us to advance the peaceful, non-violent goals of the Iranian people and to lessen the power and persecution of the government in oppressing, imprisoning, torturing, and executing such people. Thank you. I'd also like to add that as an Iranian American woman, as a product of the Iranian diaspora, and as a daughter of a political prisoner that faced execution in Iran, I owe my life, and the life of my father, in no small part, to the brave efforts of journalists who have continued to fight and strive to bring truth to light and to continue to fight against these human rights violations. And it is incredibly humbling and an absolute honor to stand before you today and accept such a prestigious award that brings so much awareness to the plight of the women of Iran, and in particular to those women who were brave enough to stand up and stand on the front lines and fight for it. So thank you so much.
I would now like to invite a representative of the Kano Foundation to come up on stage, and also the Assistant Director General, to award both a certificate and the medal representing the UNESCO Guillermo Kano Prize for 2023.